a lot of misinformation out there on Bill C-8. Now, this is, only of interest to Canadians, but we currently have this bill working its way through the legislative system called Bill C-8, an act respecting cybersecurity, and on and on and on. And it's gone through the House of Commons now. It did its thing, it's been approved, and it's just headed off to the Senate where it's passed its first reading yesterday. And this has been a pretty controversial bill. A lot of people are worried about what it means in terms of privacy and their information. And, some people, when they report on it, they characterize it as having these sweeping new powers. So, it's something to pay attention to. Just my disclaimer at first, I'm really interested in this stuff. I used to work for CSE, which has a big role to play in cybersecurity, but I am not a legal expert. If that's what you're looking for, this is not the video. But I did read a whole bunch of stuff, and I'm going to give you my thoughts and analysis on what I read. So really cool, on the Parliament website, when you're looking up the bill and you're looking up what's going on with it, you get all the information about the consultations that the House has done. And so between the second and third reading, a bill goes to committee, and committee is where they bring in witnesses and hear, testimony and opinions. They get these briefs, and that's all available online. So there were over 60 witnesses and 24 briefs submitted. I did not read all the briefs, but I checked out some of the briefs from telecommunications companies, but also like the Citizens Lab and the civil liberties organizations, because I know those people kind of had concerns to see what's been addressed and what isn't. So there were some amendments made to the bill in response to the information and testimony that committee received. So it's clear now that the minister, like whoever sort of issues an order to a telecommunication service provider, a TSP, they must not order the decoding of an encrypted private communication. So no decryption will occur during the use of this bill. That is not what it's for. Private communications are handled by the criminal code, and this bill doesn't change that. They also made a lot of amendments, and I did read the bill. It's it's not easy. So, but you can see amendments where they're making it clear for people like me, nothing in this bill contravenes the Privacy Act. So, I know it's CSE follows the Privacy Act. All government organizations follow the Privacy Act. And it says explicitly in this bill, they will still follow the Privacy Act. So, but they even go forward and make it more explicit that, the minister, and I think it's usually going to be the Minister of Industry who issues an order to a company, but the minister is responsible for privacy integrity throughout the life cycle of getting involved with a telecommunications service provider. They have to evaluate the potential impacts on the privacy of Canadians, that privacy needs to be treated in accordance with the Privacy Act throughout its life cycle. So the emphasis is very clear that privacy must be respected in this process. And a subsection was added to the act that prohibits orders to suspend the service of an individual unless it is necessary to secure the system against a specific technical threat. So there was a lot of concern about, the government could just, issue an order in secret to cut off your internet access and you would have no recourse. Well, they tried to, now you can go read it and tell me whether you think they're successful, but they're trying to make it clear that the technical threat must be specified first. So first of all, it can't be like a terrorist threat. It's like a technical threat, because this whole bill is aimed at system security. It really isn't going after individuals. It's aimed at system security, but sometimes, you have malicious actors acting to undermine the security of the system. So they have to identify the specific technical threat first, and then they have to make a clear link between the activities of a user, whether intentionally malicious or not, is something that would be addressed later on by the criminal code. At the takedown point, it's just, is this account being used to instigate, malicious activity on the network? So it has to be a specific technical threat. And then there are transparency provisions. So yes, there are orders that are issued in secret at the time, and this is why I don't kind of get as worried as some people maybe about these types of legislative amendments because I did work in the organization, spent a lot of time around policy. I know that anytime there are legislative amendments or new legislation, there is a whole suite of legal analysis and policy documents that come out of that, okay? It's not like you have a legislation and then action by individuals in the government. Between those two things are more policies than you can possibly imagine. There's strategic policies, there's legislative interpretation, there's legal definitions, and then there's corporate policies, and they go all the way down to individual operational policies that are very like step by step. This is exactly what you have to do when you're enacting these operations. So in terms of those secrecy orders, I know there's going to be a whackload of policies, and in the legislation itself, it gives off a list of the things the minister has got to do with regards to these secrecy orders. The things that the minister will later have to prove were considered, evaluated, and all of that has to be documented. And furthermore, the minister has to report to Parliament on all the secrecy orders every year, and I'm assuming it's going to be like a bit sanitized, obviously, but there has to be a publicly available summary. And that will be published on Industry Canada's website. And that is a requirement right up in this legislation. So it seems to me that one of the effects of committee and, the evaluation submitted by people like by civil liberties groups is the government recognized that it needed to be much more explicit with regards to privacy. Now, I'm not saying they addressed everything by the Citizens Lab or everything by the Civil Liberties Union, but they did address some of it, and privacy was a big one. And then when you get to the section on the critical cyber system protection itself, it really becomes evident that the act is about securing systems. When I look at the CSE people who went and spoke, they're all cybersecurity people. There's no foreign intelligence people here. They're all cybersecurity people. This is the part of the organization that, is trying to help Canada secure its systems. And there's a recognition that we don't work in these sort of little silos maybe that we did in the late 90s, early 2000s. I mean, interconnectivity, you can't secure one system if it's connected to 8 others and not secure those 8 other systems. So that's really what it's geared for. There were some concerns that, this idea of, okay, you issue an order, you get this information from a telecommunications company, and now what? It's part of the government system, and it says right in the legislation or in the bill, the proposed legislative changes, that it can be shared. It can be shared with, there's 8, 10 organizations, but the big two that people are concerned about is CSE and CSIS. Now, so one of the things the Act now makes clear is that, and it's not clear if you don't work in it, or haven't worked in it, so I get why it may not be super obvious, but CSC has multiple mandates, and just because you have this new legislation about securing systems doesn't mean that CSC gets to ignore its own legislation. It can't they have to still follow the CSE Act, right? Their own legislation. And so they have their two main, the two big ones are signals intelligence, foreign signals intelligence, but also Mandate B, which is to, I used to know this like this, but it's like to provide protection, guidance, and advice of systems of importance to the government of Canada. So this Bill C-8 is just reaffirming CSE's role in that Mandate B space, so that when the service provider under this new act that Bill C-8 is putting forth, cybersecurity protection, they're going to provide info to CSE only under Mandate B. It's not going to be used for foreign intelligence purposes. It's being used for the mandate to provide advice, guidance, and services to protect. It's the protection mandate. So it's probably, I don't want to confirm, but 95%. It's the same for CSIS, right? Even though just because new information is coming in doesn't mean it goes into this giant pool of information that can now be pulled out to use for, foreign intelligence investigations. The information is separated. You have to understand right now, CSE technically has access to a ton of Canadian information under its Mandate B, not under its foreign signals intelligence mandate. And that information is completely it's separate. It's not shared. And so this just feeds into that that other part, not the foreign intelligence part. So a couple changes made that really clear. And another big concern with the Bill C-8, the proposed changes, was the idea of sharing to a foreign entity. So I did see in there that there are restrictions on use, that sharing outside of Canada has to be under an MOU that restricts the use of that info. And it can only be disclosed to a foreign state for the purposes of securing a Canadian telecommunications system or the telecommunications system of the foreign state. It can't be shared for like a murder investigation. The whole provision of this bill is to protect telecommunication systems and to protect, and therefore sharing has to be consistent with that purpose. And then the final thing is, I know I had read before, people are really worried about the government through this bill being able to install backdoors. The proposed changes make clear that the point of this bill is to increase security. Backdoors do not increase security. Backdoors compromise security. The point of this bill is to not do investigations, it's to do protection. So although I couldn't find backdoor anywhere in the bill, it would be very inconsistent with the provisions of the bill, because the bill, like I said, is designed to protect systems. It's trying to, whether or not it's going to be successful, there are other problems with it, let me know, but it's trying to help the government help telecommunications providers secure systems. Now, that's not only about hardware, sometimes that's about securing against malicious actors. And that's why there are roles for individuals, and individual roles are addressed in this bill. But I really can't understand how a backdoor would be used in this situation, and it was not made explicit in the bill, and I didn't find a good example of why in a bill about protection there would be justification for a backdoor. So thoughts or comments, let me know. I know this one is really controversial. People are struggling with it. Now, this is not a comprehensive overview. There are a lot of briefs. There's the bill itself. And I'm not a lawyer. So this is just my analysis on what I've read so far. I still think things could be clearer. I understand why people may have concerns, but just a reminder that, the bill still does have to follow the Charter of Rights and Freedoms. And if there are use cases that come up that don't respect the Charter, then there will be legal issues. And, I don't like that. That's how these things might get addressed. But let me know, because I know people had a lot of concerns. So I'm interested to hear if this kind of made you feel better about any of them, or if you still see these big loopholes and you're worried about how, actors in the government might step through. Otherwise, I hope everyone is doing fantastic.